Next up, PHMSA always gets all the maybe attention or the heat on their regulatory program, but the state regulators actually have more inspectors out in the field than PHMSA does. So next we're going to hear from, let's see if I can find the right slideshow. We're going to hear from Randy Knepper, who's the incoming chair. He just became chair recently of the National Association of Pipeline Safety Representatives. He'll be chair there for a year, I guess. And he's going to tell us what the state inspectors have been up to.
Okay, how do I do this? Down with an arrow? All right. That makes it easy. I wanted to thank everyone for being here and taking the time to come out of your busy schedules of your lives. It's really important. I think it's there's no better forum than this. It's a great forum for me. I see industry all the time. I deal with the federal government all the time and PHMSA, but I don't get a chance to deal with the municipalities from other states, the League of Women Voters, and the people whose lives are affected. So that's really important to me. I thank everybody for being here. So what is NAPSR? I represent the National Association of Pipeline Safety Representatives, and we are states. We're the states, as Carl was saying, we're the people that go out and do the inspections. We run the programs. We don't work for Jeff. We don't work for the federal government, although we do take federal funds. Our goals are the same. Our methods aren't exactly identical, and the reason is because the majority of the pipes that we regulate and inspect go right up to people's homes, oftentimes in people's homes, and they're the majority of the miles of the pipeline in the United States. So I'm from a small state, but I represent all states, and that's what I'm here for today, whether you're have a lot of pipelines or a little. These are the 6 things that Alan's already talked about. We're going to talk about constraints, ensuring safety, what's the public knowledge out there of what we're doing, and how can you help. So what are the constraints that states have to deal with? So first of all, states don't have unlimited resources. We don't have unlimited budgets. We have to work with things. There's about 325 of us as inspectors. There's probably a total of about 600 total of us between administrative support and program managers in total that regulate the pipeline safety. So that's in addition to the 200 people at the federal level. We need to be, so with that, we have to optimize those precious resources that we have. And so how does the state do that? What areas, we look at what areas within the operator's duties do we have to target these inspection forces, right? So if I can't be there every day, I can't be embedded in the companies, we have 2 million miles to look at, we have to somehow do a targeting. So when we do that, we got to figure out what we're going to focus on. And each state does it differently because each operator is differently. The environment in which the pipelines are built are different. The communities in which they serve are different. And so we do it a little bit differently. We do have common things, but those are the things that we look at to see what we focus on. What I focus on in New Hampshire in the Northeast may not be what is being focused on in Arizona or in or the state of Washington. So the theme of this is, when do we need to implement this verification over trust? So when do we start to do this verification? So I think most inspectors inherently trust operators, but it's not that blind trust I think that NTSB was referring to before. It's not a carte blanche, you get to go do what you want, but we have to have some level of trust. But we act a little bit like Columbo when we're asking questions. And so quickly, if answers don't come together, they don't seem to make sense, we're into verification mode all the time. So I think being a state regulator by our nature, you have to be skeptical. You have to be wanting to scrutinize things. Can't be afraid to ask 100 questions. You can't be afraid to ask it again and again and again until you're satisfied. And then when we're satisfied with a certain area, we move on to another area. That's what an inspector does. Now, we get trained by the federal government, and they do an excellent job of training us. We get consistent uniform training across the country. But that inspection, you have to be almost like a person who wants to be able to be a master puzzle solver. Because these pipelines are underground, they're not seen, and they're run by different operators, and you have to put all that together to determine what's going on. So, and then the last thing is, when we have to do some verification, what steps must be performed in a verification process. So I want to kind of talk about some of the things that state regulators often look at when we're doing inspections. So one of the first questions I'll ask is, tell me about the history of the pipeline. Does the pipeline operator have knowledge of the system? Was it inherited? And depending upon those kind of answers, if they're not good, that first red flag comes up. And now I'm starting to go into verification mode. Can the operator explain the materials used that were done in different periods of time, maybe in the 60s or from 72 to 78? Do they have knowledge of that? Can they explain it in a logical manner, in a chronological fashion? If they can't, I start getting more skeptical, and my verification antenna starts going up even more. And can the operator even identify different vintages? You know, people seem to think that they know every stitch and every inch of the pipeline system. They don't. It's much like me knowing the wiring in my house. It's covered up. I can't see it. I didn't build it. It was put in by someone else. Someone else may have lived there. There may have been alterations. And so I have to do a lot of hunting and pecking. But every time we don't get some consistent answers, these red flags appear. And so we start looking at that verification becomes more important than the trust. So we ask how thorough are the operator's responses. If they're not good, more flags. And can the operator support and explain different operating practices over time? So do they know how they installed something in the 60s? When did they change something in the 70s? Can they answer those kind of questions? Because the thing that stayed this constant throughout all this is the pipeline system, right? It's not moving, it's not changing. It's the people, it's the personnel, it's the organizations, it's the inspectors. Our workforce changes, the operator's workforce changes, but the system remains there. So can the operator support and explain past construction practices? Those start setting up more red flags. And so verification is really just asking for a lot of questions, and depending upon those responses, if we're not satisfied, we just keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper. So another question I will ask, has the pipeline been through numerous mergers and acquisitions? So let's say we have a small municipal operator in the Midwest. You know, some of the things that are good about those operators being a municipality is there is consistency. Employees tend to be there for a long time. There's not a lot of turnover. They may have had consistent construction practices and construction operational methods or materials used. I've been using that same material for the last 30 years. Okay, that's good. Then our verification antenna kind of goes down a little bit because I'm not finding some of the things that are going to raise those red flags. Another way is, another example is if we had a shareholder-owned company that has had lots of merger acquisition over the history. I have one operator in my own state. It's been turned over and flipped 4 times now in the last decade. So with that comes new employees, comes different procedures, new operation and maintenance procedure, different qualifications, different history. So those kind of things turn into risk? Do they look at detailed record keeping as just an expense? You know, there's no income coming in from record keeping the detail, right? The income comes in for the volume of the gas that's flowing or the liquid that's being passed by. But record keeping is just as important as the asset itself. That's all we have to go on. So our risk starts getting bigger if we don't find that there's really good record keeping. And do they have an inconsistency in the materials and test methods used in the maintenance procedures and operating procedures? Has it changed over time? Do they just say, I'm not really sure? So our risk just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and that's what we focus on. The third thing I want to talk about today is, can we ever ensure complete safety and eliminate 100% of all hazards? All I can say is there are no absolutes. We can't guarantee 100% that the pipeline will never have a problem. I can't attest to that. I can't authenticate that or sanction that. I am not part of the company's workforce. I can't be responsible for, I can only be responsible for what we see, what we observe. We're not on site all the time. We're not there and part of every daily function that goes on and every maintenance activity that's occurring. So the answer is there are no absolutes on that. But most state laws require the pipeline owners or the operators to provide safe service. So that's the law. They're required to, by law, have safe systems. So the structural framework puts that burden on the operator. So the pipeline owner or operator has that burden. But it is my responsibility with oversight to regulate, review, and enforce and monitor in an effort to control the public hazards to an extent that you and the public have sufficient confidence in what we do. And if you don't have confidence in what we do, then we're failing. You know, you should not have to worry about injury. You shouldn't have to worry about property damage. And you shouldn't have to worry about the risk of life, the loss of life. And so those are our responsibilities as state inspection force, is to minimize the exposure to those things. So one of the questions I think Carl put together was what more needs to be done? Well, I think oversight has to be continuous. You know, the companies that are talking about continual improvement, oversight has to be always there. They're just not going to do it on their own. You need to have inspectors there all the time. Would I like to have more? Absolutely. Can we ever have enough? No. But we have to have our presence there and be part of that. We are one of the stakeholders, just as you are. The other thing is I think the regulation must be balanced. Too much regulation can be overkill. Are we there yet? I don't think so. But at the end of the day, consumers absorb all the costs of regulation. And then lastly, I think we always have to, what can we do more? We can always try to reduce the risks. Going to zero, as they're saying. Get that and eliminate as many as we can. Will we eliminate them all? Probably not. But it's our job to keep, all our jobs here is to reduce the risks. So how can the public know what we're doing? So in 2010, the trust observed many our websites that we have in the States were not easy to navigate and did not have readily posted information that they were looking for. It wasn't there. And so we weren't really informing the public very well, and so they kind of asked us to do something. And so what do we do in the states? Some states have improved their websites and made existing information readily available. I think David here has a pretty good website from the state of Washington that we're doing. But we got many states that haven't. And so by putting the spotlight on us, I think we're going to. Now, I represent NAPSR, and so we've recognized that there's a need and to intend to fill that gap, both interim as well as long term. we need to beef up our website, get some of that information out, and get those links and be the driver of some of that. You know, we're 50 states. Our challenge will now be to keep it fresh and up to date. We have our home state responsibilities, but I think if the NAPSR organization benefits, if the public benefits, we all will. So that's going to be one of our things. I'm not a technical specialist on that, but I do realize there's a need, so we're going to fill that. How can the public know what we're doing? So on the website, we're going to reformat it. We're going to upgrade the website. Some of the suggestions that we're going to put on there is to do some of the similar things that the Pipeline Safety Trust has done, is to post our annual resolutions that we give to the federal government, so you're aware of them. We'll post whatever written comments we make on the PHMSA dockets, those notice of proposed rulemakings. States comment just like anybody else. NAPSR does. I can comment as both a state individually, or I can comment as a group. We'll post whatever testimony we have in congressional inquiries. We'll post summaries of our annual and regional meetings. We're also going to try to update some of the numerous task force. We're on, I think, something like 40 plus subcommittees and task force looking over technical issues, from welding to valves to data to you have it. All those, that laundry list that Alan had, that's all supported by states, and we're part of that process. So every time there's a workshop, every time there's a conference, we're trying to be there and to get our input in. We want to feature state programs, maybe do an interview with program managers, so that people that are interested can find out what other states are doing, what are the new things that they're doing in each of those states. We want to link to state inspection summaries, maybe some inspection reports, so that the public can see that. And we want to post some enforcement actions that states have taken. We've been doing these things, but we're not very good, and we don't make it very easy for people to find out or attain that. So I think the web is the way to do it, and we just voted 2 weeks ago at our national conference, which was in Pennsylvania, to put more emphasis on the NAPSR website. Gave Jeff a resolution. I'm hoping he'll support it. They typically do. If they make sense, they're very good with helping things with grants and things. So we think that'll benefit all the stakeholders, PHMSA, Pipeline Safety Trust, the public at large, my own state regulators, media, anyone that wants to know about what we're doing. So, and then the last question was, how can the public assist with ensuring safety? I think the Pipeline Safety Trust can provide us input and feedback on our website. I think they can put some links on theirs to ours, and we can do the same to theirs. And I think we can support, I'd like to see the Pipeline Safety Trust maybe support us when we're going to state legislators, trying to put in new pipeline safety initiatives in each of the states, or more robust damage prevention laws, underground damage prevention laws, or pipeline safety laws. I think that's one thing that we can always use that help. I appear before our legislators in our state, but it's always nice to have support for what we do. We can increase, I think, the pipeline safety, or the public can increase the dialogue with state regulators, and that's a two-way street. We need to do the same with you. And I think, lastly, I think you need to hold us accountable. Accountability, holding everybody accountable, is the way to do things. I think, you know, we're here to hold operators of pipelines accountable. I think the public has to hold us accountable, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just improves everything. And I think that's all I have.